Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the Mark Adams suspension and a ticking clock. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, and as the clock ticks, as the world turns, we wait for clarity. Of course, you probably know by now, if you're a Red Raider fan, not one just recently emerging from under a boulder or a cavern or a coma of some kind, Texas Tech has suspended head men's basketball coach Mark Adams due to allegations of racial insensitivity in invoking Bible scripture. So catch up on that if you missed the episode from yesterday. But as we sit here today, Chris, coming to you later on Monday, because there was obviously some anticipation of at any minute today, some clarity being added because of so many interesting timeline benchmarks that we're kind of crossing as the hours go by. We're having this conversation afternoon on Monday. We've got a practice scheduled this afternoon. We've got a flight leaving for a conference tournament tomorrow morning. Conference tournaments come with media obligations. So there's so many things out there that we're kind of checking off here so far without much clarity publicly. Doesn't mean that what's going on behind the scenes obviously doesn't offer some more, but I think that's been one of the more interesting things to kind of witness here is just the vagueness of what the plan is for some immediate obligations playing out as you get into conference tournament week.
Yeah, you're just kind of, you're just waiting for, and again, I say the general public or the fan base just kind of waiting to see kind of what direction the university decides to go here. But I think your point is that business continues. I mean, typical for the team to arrive in Kansas City either 2 days or 1 day before their first game. I think that, there's I don't know specifically what. My guess would be there would be some, obligations for the head coach to, speak to the media about the game and all those kinds of things. And so, but you're not, as we're sitting here talking, you're just not real sure who that will be. And that kind of creates the awkwardness of us sitting here right now, because you're just not, and there's obviously preparation that leads to these games and things like that. And you're just not real sure who's in charge. And I'm only left to speculate, which is a tricky word. But that's really all we can do is that I'm just taking the release sent out by Texas Tech and Wes Bloomquist yesterday that indicated that there would be an investigation and like a looking into kind of what all has gone on here. I'm only left to guess that is still continuing as we sit here and talk. Otherwise, you would have resolution. I think that's those are somewhat easy dots to connect, but maybe we're off base. But in the meantime, though, you do have a game at 6:00 and on Wednesday night and against a really good West Virginia team that's likely an NCAA tournament team. So how much will change between now and then? What is the public told? I really don't know, Casey. I don't. But yeah, I mean, I think we both have similar questions to a lot of the folks that they may be watching this, or they're just part of the Tech fan base in general that have interest in this program.
Yeah, and of course there is a larger picture here to be considered than just, I think, this most recent instance of disgruntlement or what is being investigated or an inquiry is being involved in. There's a different feeling with those two words. I couldn't remember. Was it an investigation or an inquiry? An inquiry sounds like a little more British, a little nicer, like they just come with a billy club and not a pistol.
That may be the correct word.
Investigation seems a little more hard-hitting. I don't know, but either way, they're asking questions. And I touched on yesterday's show the thought of a season that has generally featured disgruntlement, probably leading to not a very rosy picture being painted by those principals involved in the season. Even if you're just asking a singular question about, hey, what happened with this particular incident, you're likely to get a different kind of picture painted at large, given the season you had in the rear view now versus if you had a really successful one. I think that's just human nature, and we could probably all understand it. That's the way that I ran it down yesterday, and I would imagine that's the way that it's very likely playing out, Chris. And that's the bigger picture that I think is really interesting that maybe some have not kept up with or wanted to pay any mind to, and that's totally fine as well. Sometimes I just like watching the ball bounce and thinking, well, I'm rooting for these guys in this colored shirt, even if I don't know what their name is or what the backstory is. That's fine too. But there is also more at play throughout the season. I used the word, I think, turmoil on yesterday's show. Below the surface, above the surface, it was always there to some extent, Chris. And I don't know at the end of the day what is ground zero for like blame to be cast. But I know that there are many Locked On Texas Tech viewers and listeners that have been commenting on YouTube or otherwise who have been asking questions about, is this a convenient avenue towards a resolution that was desired to begin with anyway? Where does this piece fit into it? And I think there are some who are not really, in touch with that bigger picture, possibly, Chris, that are seeing this singular incident as a Tech fan and wondering, what? This is going to terminate a guy, really, without hard evidence to the contrary to suggest that really there was some overt oppression exerted or really harsh intentional racial insensitivity. I think a lot of fans are going to be like, what? A Bible verse invoked or something to try to teach a lesson, and now the sky's falling. But that's probably because maybe you haven't followed all along like some have some general turmoil that's been around the program. And I think for all those who are asking out there among Locked On Texas Tech viewers or listeners about how this fits in, I would certainly say it is only a piece. I don't even know if it's the key piece or the biggest piece, but it's a piece to what has been a tumultuous season on and off the floor. Correct me where I'm going wrong on painting that picture, or where you agree or disagree.
Well, and you were right. It was inquiry. It wasn't investigation. So I sit corrected. I went back and looked up that's just my fault on the wrong I word. But this is I think everything that you're talking about here, on the floor, off the floor, whatever anybody thinks has happened. I mean, people can read social media. You can believe what you want. There's a lot that's been out there, but this is typically what happens with losing. And if you're winning, you don't really hear a whole lot. And when you're losing, there's all kinds of things out there. Who knows how much of what is out there or has been out there or whatever? Because you can go back to the issue with Fardaws back in December, maybe, I guess it was. And if he's getting in the portal, if he's not, who knows how that really played out. But again, it all just comes back to you just not winning enough games, and people get frustrated, and fans do, players do. But that's just part of the territory when you get to this level, is that people are unhappy with the outcomes, plural. And so then they get a little more vocal, I guess, is the best way. Sure. Yeah. And I think we've all seen that. I've seen plenty out there, some of which I'm like, I didn't know that, or is that true? And so I just think that, unfortunately, because so much of what is been said or written or speculated on, so much of that would have been the case last year, and you didn't really hear anything about that, right?
Right. Right.
What's the difference?
I heard about it at the local watering hole, but it wasn't smattered all over.
But I mean, but what's the difference is that, you won a lot of games last year and all that. So, people like winning. So I just, again, the inquiry, it may be, for all we know, it could be about a lot of things. It could be about this particular. I have no way of knowing how broad something like this would go, and I didn't know anything about the alleged spitting incident that Jeff Goodman, I guess, reported on. That was news to me. And are there other things like that? I mean, are they looking into that as well? Who knows? But I'd be willing to bet that is what is taking some time here. And I think if you're Kirby Hocutt and the rest of the school and the stakeholders, you have to be crystal clear about what has happened. And I think that right, wrong, or indifferent in 2023, the players will largely decide kind of how this thing proceeds.
Mostly been the precedent elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. And, the only really one, and there may have been others, and I could have missed it, but I saw Davion Harmon, post something, hey, we're going to be good. Appreciate everybody checking on us, or love everybody, or whatever it was. And, but I think it's interesting that you haven't seen more from them, and maybe it's because they don't want to say anything. Maybe they were told, hey, let's not say anything. But because in a lot of these instances, you see a lot of players kind of say, no, here's what is right out there. Here's what's wrong out there. Here's the facts or untruths that have been said about, but it's kind of, and that's, so again, you're just kind of left to, I hate to use the word speculate, but just kind of, but they, I guarantee you, they are the main focus of the inquiry of the leadership at Texas Tech, and kind of what they convey on what didn't happen, or when it happened, or how many times. I mean, that's up to them. But in the meanwhile, Mark is, Mark was, caught in a weird spot, I guess, last week, and here we go, so
off to the races. And very difficult from a leadership perspective, I'm sure, to want to really center some things around the experience of the student athletes. By the same token, trying to be measured in response and not be at the mercy of said student athletes entirely. Obviously, there's a balance that's got to be struck. Hopefully that's what they're doing. I think the questions, though, again, from Locked On Texas Tech viewers or listeners about the bigger picture are appropriate in this instance. I know there's many of you that have been following it very, very closely, like so many of us have, with this similar sickness we call Texas Tech fandom. So it's good to have some company in that regard. Chris, there is also the matter of $7 million. But first, today's episode brought to you by Built Bar. You're looking for a delicious treat, but you're not looking for all the fat, all the calories. I got what you need. It's Built Bar. What makes them so good? For starters, covered in 100% real chocolate. You got it. Real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, or coconut almond. Not sure how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better, they're good for you. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Even better now, not only can you get them at BuiltBar.com, but you can get them at your nearest Walmart, your nearest Sam's Club. Get there today and get in on something that tastes great and is great for you. You can thank me later after you've tried your first Built Bar. Chris, there is also the matter of $7 million. We would be fools in big business like this to not consider contract implications, right? With cause, without cause. Terminations in one category or the other are very, very different experiences. And I think there was good reason to believe that as of late this morning, there was still very much, decision-making to be done as to what the ultimate resolution was going to look like. But I would also have some inclination to believe that when the decision is made, there's still got to be a period of time, one way or another, to cross every T, dot every I, and then go back and do it again, because we are talking about massive amounts of money being at stake here for either party if there is ever to be some separation. So I think maybe some of us are also expecting, maybe we know the resolution or have an inkling of how this is going to go, but we're wondering about the timeline, and you better be considering those legal aspects of it as well when thinking about those type of things.
Yeah, and this is where it gets awkward to talk about, just because you're talking about people's livelihoods and everything like that. But there's plenty of people that write about this stuff nationally that have heavily speculated that Mark won't coach here anymore based on what has happened, and whether that's trying to apply pressure to Texas Tech or just their opinion or whatever it is. But, and then there's plenty of people that doesn't seem to be much middle ground. I guess it's like,
right.
I think, is that fair to say? It's either you're in the camp of how I can't believe this has happened, he'll never coach again, or I cannot believe he's in trouble for this. That's kind of, the two camps. And again, I think it's just important for us to know, or me specifically, I don't know what all went on here. I don't know how much other went on here. And that's, so we're only left to go off of the release that was sent out. But I do think that, to your point, he is under contract. He's got several years left on his contract. And I think, there's a lot of legalities that you've got to, the way that the contract is stated and written, and then you've got people's opinions and all that. And somewhere there's got to be a sweet spot to where you figure out how to proceed here. And I mean, I as I said to you when we first talked about this, that I think all options are still on the table, and I still believe that. I think that you're not going to have a hard time convincing me that he, that the option A, B, C, or D, and that, hey, you could sell me on any of those. I do think because each option comes with something, like if he were to be reinstated, I think that, people would want to know from the player or from the players or from the head coach, kind of, can we clarify? Can we make everybody understand what went on? And so everybody can kind of somewhat be not okay, but somewhat,
Be closure.
Exactly. I think that's
together.
I think that's well said. And so,
honey, why'd you slap me in the face? I'm going to need to know if we're going to continue, or the allegations. I mean, why were they rooted in what they were rooted in? Look, here's something I've been trying to consider, Chris, because there's so many, and I said this yesterday, so many layers to this stinky onion, however you process it. The bigger picture of the season, general disgruntlement because of either competitive issues, off the floor issues, disgruntlement between player in leadership or booster in leadership or administrator in leadership or leadership in leadership. There's so many things to consider as this season has gone along. It has truly been a twisting, grinding, and bending kind of experience for Texas Tech basketball this year. There's no doubt about that. But I have a hard time, and it's just my pure speculation. I have a very, very hard time seeing how Mark Adams is the head coach of the next basketball game that Texas Tech is going to play to open up the Big 12 tournament. I have a very hard time seeing how Mark Adams continues on as the leader of the program. Again, only my speculation, but it doesn't have very much to do, or hardly any at all, because I'm really not rendering a judgment as to the appropriateness of that outcome or not, the fairness or unfairness. We're talking business, by the way, so I don't know if fairness should even play into it. But I really just feel like the layer we have to consider there is the salesman aspect of this all, the recruiting aspect of this all, what the job actually does require. And to some extent, that, I think, right or wrong, fair or unfair, has been almost irreversibly stained. Like, it's only those who are going to know Mark Adams personally, I guess, that will be able to have any defense in this court of public opinion. And that could be an unfortunate outcome if it is unfairly executed or unjustly executed. But I feel like that's the reality that we're living in. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but there's an aspect of this of how are you, if we were to remain, together, how are you to then go out and execute your job to the best of your ability as a salesman or, flag bearer of Texas Tech University? I think we're naive or foolish to leave that part out. We mentioned it yesterday.
Yeah, and I think that's a very extremely fair point. How do you recruit? This is 2023, and I think it would be very difficult to sell your program with some of this hanging over you, unless there's closure and context offered up, and people are like, okay, that makes sense or whatever, and not that everybody would need to, but with what we know now, I think it would be extremely difficult to go sell your program and recruit under these circumstances. And again, that's my opinion. I know you've offered the same thing, just because, and like I knew, I think it was a bit of a different example, but there was a high profile prospect that I think was committed to Creighton named Ty Washington back when Greg McDermott made some comments, and he ended up, I think, changing his commitment based on whether that was directly related or not. I have no idea. But, Creighton has obviously been really good and all that whenever all that happened. And I'm not trying to compare the scenarios just so much. And I'm comparing that some things at these schools, it does affect recruiting, I guess is my point. And but I think that's really what college football and college basketball is. It's all about the players. It's all about recruiting. It's all about, that's why you build the Womble, to attract high profile kids that are quality humans that are good at basketball. And I think that's the area that you're worried about student athletes and everything like that, but you're worried about luring student athletes or recruiting them and all that. And I do think that with what we know now, and again, there'll be some sort of closure here. So, but
Sure.
We're just in the midst. We're in the in between, which is why it just is kind of a bunch of speculation from our standpoint. But I do think without closure, that's where it would be difficult to recruit. But that's with what we know, and I'm sure there's plenty that we don't. But because here's the other timeline, Cowan, is that the portal window opens up March the 13th. If you look at your calendar, that's a week away from today. And at that point, anybody that wants to enter the portal, they can. And there's I think a 60 day window, whatever it is for basketball. I think it goes from March 13th, maybe until a few weeks into May. So it must be 60 for basketball. But point is, while we don't know anything now, I bet we start to get some sense of what is going on here rather soon, just because of that date, if anything, because what's to stop anybody from getting in the portal? Like, I don't really know who my head coach is what direction they're going. I mean, all that. And I've got to worry about me, that kind of thing. So
yeah, the clock is ticking.
Yeah. I mean, I just offer that up just to give people an idea that's why. And again, I think that if Kirby and his folks, the inquiry, I apologize again for using investigation, because you're right. Investigation, it sounds so much harsher than inquiry, and I didn't mean to do that.
I thought more Mary Poppins than like Kojak or whatever.
But that's why they have to be like, they have to have all the info. They have to have all the info from all parties, and there's, like I said yesterday when we were visiting, there's a lot of people working over at men's basketball. There's a lot of quality people over there, and I'm sure you at least owe them, all of them, a say in kind of, well, how have you seen or heard, what you're dealing with, or who knows the line of questions that everybody's getting, but you need the totality of everything before you can make a decision. So I guess we are just in the midst of that right now.
Would expect some resolution, at least for the meantime, to be coming sooner rather than later. And then, of course, we'll continue to have a fluid situation. I would imagine, as Chris mentions, the transfer portal window and so many things to consider anyway, just on the heels of the kind of season that you had, much less with things added as we get nearer to the offseason. Sand through the hourglass, my friend. These are the days of our Texas Tech lives going on, at least me and you, simpatico, for about a decade and a half now. I remember you back in 2009 sitting on a table at United Supermarkets Arena broadcasting. Somebody comes up, hey, you guys heard anything about a guy getting locked in a closet? What? Here we are, buddy, 2023, and always continues to be compelling.
Have I ever told you that it's funny you said, have you ever told you that story of, so Robert Giovanetti and I are hosting the Mike Leach Show.
But first, today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sports book, FanDuel. And now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app. Become a new customer because new customers get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't hit. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line, point scores, 3 points drained if basketball is your thing, or all points in between. Underwater basket weaving, anyone. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Have I ever told you that it's funny you said, have you ever told you that story of, so Robert Giovanetti and I are hosting the Mike Leach Show in this deal, like at this time. Mm-hmm. We are going to tape the show that's going to air, I think, before the bowl game versus Michigan State. We're going to tape it with Mike Leach. We're going to do it in the afternoon over at Ruby Tequila's. Remember across the street from the football building?
And I remember the March Madness special, extra shot of that Ruby Tequila.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Hey.
And we were going to tape, and it was going to be like at 2:30 one afternoon. And we were going to tape it as a live show and all that because the way travel schedules were and the team was getting out of town much earlier than that. Shocker, for a taping, Mike shows up a bit later, and he's like, well, sorry I'm late. I was dealing with some malcontents, and I had a meeting about it and all that. So I apologize for being late. So we taped this whole show. And again, mind you, I have no idea what has gone on, what is going on. He had just come from a meeting with, I think, his bosses about Adam James. I knew nothing of it, nothing about it. And then Giovanetti and I were like, that show obviously never aired. I don't know if there's a copy of it somewhere, but it never obviously aired because he was no longer the head coach a matter of, I guess, days or whatever after that.
We probably missed some great Leachisms we were robbed of.
Very, very possibly. But
we should air that episode.
Yeah, none of us ever know everything that goes on. But, I mean, I was just like when I was sitting there, and, I mean, a couple of days later, I'm like, well, I guess now I know why he was a bit late that day. And now I know why he used the term malcontent. But anyway, yeah.
And now I know I got a little sweet tea on the floor as I pour one out for the Pirate. But yeah, these are the days of our Texas Tech lives, man.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment.
Yeah, someday we need to do some shows on. I'm trying to think, man. Billy Clyde, you got Matt Wallerstedt, you got Chad Glasgow.
James Willis.
Yeah. Yes.
Some of these shows that have to be aired at a certain, time of night.
There's a lot that has gone on here, but that's just, again, that's just kind of part of the business or college athletics, man. Yep. And you deal with a lot of money and you deal with a lot of pressure, and people come, people go, and people switch jobs a lot, and that's just part of it. But anyway.
Hang with us. Not our first Red Raider rodeo, unfortunately. Been through it a time or two. Yeah. Glad to be going through it with you out there all across Locked On Texas Tech Nation. So thanks for joining us on YouTube or anywhere you're getting podcasts, making us your first listen. What's next? Stay tuned to find out. For the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us again on Locked On Texas Tech.